There are moments in history when the world changes, not because of war, not because of invention, and not because of kings, but because someone notices a stone, a rough crystal pulled from mud, a flash of green hidden inside rock, a red gem mistaken for another for centuries, a dark opal burning with color beneath the dust of a forgotten landscape. At first, these stones looked ordinary, or they were misunderstood, or they were hidden where no one expected to find them. But once they were recognized, the effects reached far beyond beauty. Trade shifted, empires paid attention, royal collections changed, entire gem markets were redefined. And perhaps the most fascinating part is this: some of the most important gemstones in history were not simply rare, they were lost to human understanding. Sometimes they were buried in the earth, sometimes they were hidden in remote regions, and sometimes they were sitting in plain sight under the wrong name. In this story, we follow 4 gemstone discoveries that changed history forever. 4 moments when the earth revealed something extraordinary, and humanity was forced to rethink value, power, and the meaning of treasure. Because the truth is, some of the most important gems in history were not created by kings. They were simply found too late. Long before laboratories, before auctions, and before modern gem certificates, people already understood that certain stones carried unusual power. A gem could be wealth, status, religion, mystery, and authority all at once. But the most powerful stones were often not the ones already known. They were the ones still waiting to be recognized. That is what makes a lost gem discovery so important. It is not always about a gem disappearing and then being found again. Sometimes it means a region whose true value was hidden from the wider world. Sometimes it means a gemstone that existed in royal hands for centuries but was misunderstood. Sometimes it means a material ignored until one discovery changed its reputation forever. One of the clearest examples of this happened in the Green Mountains of what is now Colombia. Today, Colombian emeralds are considered some of the finest in the world. Their rich green color has become a global standard. But there was a time when the wider world did not fully understand the importance of the emerald zones of Muzo and Chivor. Long before European conquest, indigenous communities in these regions already knew these green stones were special. They valued them spiritually and culturally. They were not just ornaments, they were part of a deeper relationship with the land. Then came the Spanish in the 16th century, driven by a hunger for wealth. They were searching for gold, but they soon discovered something else that would become just as influential in luxury history. The emerald deposits of Colombia were unlike anything they had seen. These were not ordinary green stones. They displayed an intense, vivid color that would eventually define the image of fine emerald for centuries. What changed history was not simply the existence of the emeralds, it was the moment they entered global trade. Once the Spanish realized what they had found, Colombian emeralds began crossing oceans. They moved into European courts, into religious treasures, into elite collections, and eventually into markets across the Ottoman world, Persia, and India. These stones did not stay local, they became global. And that transformed more than jewelry. It changed trade routes. It strengthened colonial extraction. It influenced cutting traditions and luxury culture. It linked one region of geology to the power of empire. A hidden green treasure became one of the most important luxury materials in the world. The earth had made the stone in silence, but once humans recognized it, history moved. That same pattern would happen again in a very different place, with a very different color, and with a gemstone that would define perfection in red. High in the valleys of Mogok, in present-day Myanmar, nature created some of the finest rubies ever known. Today, the name Mogok is legendary in the gemstone world. It is associated with exceptional ruby color, especially the intense glowing red that collectors and traders still treat with near mythical respect. But like so many great gem stories, the wider world did not always understand what was hidden there. Ruby is already rare. It is the red variety of corundum, colored by chromium. But fine ruby, with strong color, transparency, and brilliance, is much rarer than most people realize. And in Mogok, geological conditions aligned in a way that produced stones so extraordinary that they would eventually shape the global idea of what ruby should be. The rubies of this region were known in local and regional trade long before the modern luxury market formalized their reputation. But once the world began to understand what Mogok could produce, ruby itself changed in the eyes of buyers, traders, and collectors. These stones did not simply enter the market, they redefined the market. That is what separates an ordinary gemstone discovery from a historical one. A historical discovery changes the rules. Mogok rubies established a benchmark. They influenced how color was judged. They helped create the mythology around origin. Even today, in the gem trade, origin can dramatically affect value, and part of that psychology comes from discoveries like Mogok. A ruby from a historically revered source is not just a stone, it carries the weight of reputation, scarcity, and memory. And over time, that reputation only deepened. As access changed and truly exceptional stones became harder to find, the old discoveries became even more powerful. The source became legendary, the material became scarcer, and the idea of perfection became attached to a place that the world once did not fully appreciate. Again, the same truth appears. The stone was always there. But once people understood it, the meaning of ruby changed forever. If emerald changed the meaning of green and ruby changed the meaning of red, then one discovery in Australia changed the meaning of opal itself. For centuries, opal had a complicated reputation. It fascinated people because it did something other gemstones did not do. It seemed to hold moving color inside itself. It flashed and shifted, sometimes with fire-like reds, electric greens, and deep blues. But opal was not always treated with the same stable respect as diamond, ruby, or sapphire. Its reputation rose and fell. Some saw it as magical, others saw it as unpredictable. Then came Lightning Ridge. In the remote landscapes of New South Wales, Australia, miners began uncovering something extraordinary beneath the earth: black opal. This was not the pale opal many people imagined. This was a dark-bodied opal whose internal flashes of color appeared more dramatic, more intense, and more alive than almost anything the gemstone world had seen. The dark background changed everything. It made the spectral color seem to burn from within. Red, green, blue, and gold seemed almost electric against the darkness. And that visual contrast created a new standard. The discovery of black opal at Lightning Ridge did not just add another gem to the market, it elevated opal itself. Suddenly, opal had a premium form that collectors could chase, jewelers could celebrate, and the luxury market could respect at a much higher level. This is what major gemstone discoveries do. They create hierarchy inside a gem category. After Lightning Ridge, people could no longer talk about opal in the same way. Black opal became the elite benchmark. It separated ordinary commercial material from truly rare collector-grade fire. It changed how the gem was photographed, sold, admired, and valued. Geologically, it was just as remarkable. Opal is not a crystalline gemstone like ruby or emerald. It is a hydrated form of silica, and its famous play of color comes from microscopic silica spheres arranged in a way that diffracts light. When those structures align correctly, light breaks into spectral flashes. In black opal, the dark body tone intensifies the effect dramatically. What had once been an unstable or misunderstood gem suddenly had a flagship identity. A hidden Australian discovery transformed opal from a fascinating curiosity into one of the most visually dramatic gemstones on Earth. But perhaps the most fascinating lost gem discovery of all is not a stone pulled from the ground. It is a truth pulled from history. For centuries, some of the most famous rubies in royal collections were not rubies at all. They were spinels. This is one of the greatest identity twists in gemstone history, and it reveals something profound about how humans understand value. Spinel is a real gemstone, often found in beautiful reds, pinks, and other vivid colors. Some red spinels can look so much like ruby that, before modern gemology, the two were often confused. And because ruby already carried the reputation of blood, power, and royal prestige, spinel inherited that reputation under the wrong name. One of the most famous examples is the so-called Black Prince's ruby in the British imperial state crown. Despite its name, it is not a ruby. It is a red spinel. That single fact changes how we think about gemstone history. For generations, a major royal treasure associated with monarchy and ceremony was identified incorrectly. And it was not the only one. Across royal collections and historical records,
spinels were repeatedly labeled as rubies. Why does that matter? Because it proves that a gemstone's history is not only shaped by the earth, it is shaped by human knowledge.
When gemology advanced and people learned to reliably separate ruby from spinel, the world had to correct itself. Stones that had been celebrated as rubies were reassessed. Historical collections had to be reinterpreted. And spinel, once hidden in plain sight, began to emerge as a gemstone worthy of its own respect. This is a different kind of discovery. Not a treasure found underground, but a truth discovered in objects that had already shaped history. Spinel had always been there. It had always been beautiful. It had always been sitting in crowns, ornaments, and royal collections. But the world had not truly seen it. And that may be the most powerful lesson of all. Because when we think about lost gem discoveries, we often imagine deep mines, remote mountains, and forgotten valleys. But some of the greatest discoveries happen when knowledge catches up with reality, when science corrects myth, when history admits it misunderstood what it was holding. That is why gemstone history is so much more than luxury. It is a record of human perception, of mistakes, of obsession, of delayed recognition. Colombian emeralds changed global trade and helped define what fine emerald means. Mogok rubies reshaped the world's idea of red perfection. Lightning Ridge Black Opal transformed an unpredictable gemstone into one of the most dramatic treasures on Earth. And spinel, hidden for centuries behind the name of ruby, proved that even kings can misunderstand what they possess. 4 discoveries, 4 different stones, 4 different forms of value. But all of them reveal the same truth. The world does not change the moment nature creates a gemstone. The world changes the moment humans understand what they are looking at. And that is why the lost gem discoveries that changed history are not just stories about rare minerals. They are stories about recognition. Because somewhere, even now, another stone may be waiting. It may be buried in rough rock. It may be dismissed as ordinary. It may be mislabeled in an old collection. It may be sitting in someone's hand, carrying a value no one has yet recognized. That is how history has always worked. Not always with a crown. Not always with a king. Not always with a mine. Sometimes, a king. Not always with a mine. Sometimes, with a stone the world ignored, until it became impossible to ignore. And perhaps the next great discovery is not in the past. It may still be waiting, beneath the surface.